Thanks very much. Yeah, it was interesting because Lucy sort of did touch on it there at the very beginning about with Northamptonshire, and Lucy and Janet and Fiona. You may well think that this year has been a quiet year for them. I think they'd probably beg to differ on that front. So just thought really to talk a little bit about implementing library management system during a global pandemic and whether that's just a crazy, outlandish idea. So I guess first of all, the sort of things we're hearing from people at the minute why they don't want to implement a library management system right now. Well, for one, their budgets have been slashed, or not necessarily slashed, but money has been diverted into other areas, or budgets are put on hold. So that's a big concern for people right now. There's fears that because people are distributed so far, a project's totally impractical. Staff in many cases are all working at home or they're slowly progressing back to work into the office. So that's potentially seen as a problem for people. Historically, library management systems have been systems that have been based, in a in the inside the institution. As again, as Lucy mentioned, at Northamptonshire, they had a legacy system that was on site in the library. So potentially, if you are working from home, you have no access to that system, even if you wanted to do migration. Time has been diverted just dealing with day-to-day issues with COVID. So how are we going to manage click and collect? All those sort of issues that we've heard so much about this year. Haven't got regular access to the help and resources that you need. So the barriers sort of go on and on, really. But just sort of breaking those down a little bit. So first of all, going back to the budgets have been slashed or redeployed. In many cases, that is true, but
No dobra.
what we typically find is that pandemic or no pandemic, libraries typically are paying over the odds for their library management system and have been for a number of years. And typically, what we find with libraries who move to
No,
COA
you nie
is
jem.
that in their uh,
I
in year one, they'll make a saving on their library management system, and they'll make significant savings over the years that follow on from that, particularly in a 3 to 5 year period. So just to give you a sort of example of that, so one library that implemented COA this year, they saved 50% on their library management system over 5 years. So the library director and the finance director were absolutely delighted because for them that was equivalent to tens of thousands of pounds over a 3 to 5 year period. And actually, in fact, the year one of cost of implementing COA was actually less than they were paying for their existing library management system. So again, the finance director was absolutely delighted with that kind of saving. And that saving allowed them to redeploy the money they were spending on the back end library management system into other parts of the services. When you spread that across 2 to 3 years and sort of even the cost out, then that also is a useful way that some of our libraries use to sort of smooth the cost. And I think importantly, historically, the library management system has been the sort of deep pockets of the library budget. Large amounts of money are spent on the back end library management systems. These days, the importance of the back end library management system is perhaps not what it was. Certainly when I started working in library automation, 25 years ago. But today, more importantly, you have things like e-resources, and particularly at the moment when e-books are so important, when people can't get into libraries, then the ability to be able to redirect money and resources to other parts of the library service is often welcomed. So we can't do the project remotely. Well, we've done a lot of sort of projects remotely this year and conferences, as you probably have seen. Um, and actually, Janet, Fiona, and Lucy, between them, they've implemented over 12 library systems this year, and all of those have been done remotely during the pandemic. So it's definitely possible. Interesting enough, and some of you may already know this, we've always been a virtual company when we started. Matthew had alluded to it when we all came on see him on site back in 2010. We've always been a virtual company, so we're very used to working from home, and we've been doing it for a long time, and we have the processes in place to do that. And we also have all the tools available to do that as well. So we're very familiar with running meetings through Zoom and have been for a number of years prior to the pandemic through Microsoft Teams. Our YouTube channel, as you'll see, has been very active as well. And actually, one of the things we've found interestingly more this year, because we haven't been able to visit people on sites, there are actually some distinct benefits of actually doing remote projects as well. So, for example, the ability to record training for future reference. So, we had an example just a couple of days ago, a help desk inquiry where somebody asked a question, and actually we were able to refer them back to the part in their training course that was recorded, where they could go up and actually look at the and watch the sort of scenario being played out. So that's had some benefits. There's no traveling for staff between sites or from home into the office, so that's been useful. Booking training rooms, in our experience, is always a nightmare. Getting hold of the training room, it's always busy and booked, so that's been a nice challenge not to have. And less distractions, possibly, although of course all your staff are working from home, and you can see in the bottom right hand corner the distraction I had in my office last Friday, just trying to get some work done. But it is great, and I think Janet alluded to this on the presentation she did back in our customer day back in September, that we've all had to adapt together in some ways, some shape or form, and we're all facing similar challenges at this time. So, as I said, we're very familiar. We're working at home. We're very used to it. But typically, those of us with families, we're used to working at home quietly without any interruptions. Whereas now, our staff are having to deal with exactly the same challenges that I'm sure your staff are having to deal with. That's balancing work with homeschooling and so on. I think our staff have found that in some ways this remote training is a little bit more personal almost than being on site. You almost get literally a sort of insight into people's homes, and they get an insight into your homes. Again, it's something that our staff have sort of mentioned that's made it very sort of personal. Cats walking across the keyboard, dogs interrupting and having to be fed, and so on. It does become a little bit more personal. And as part of that, we've adapted, I would say, a more flexible approach to the way we've implemented systems to accommodate a lot of this. So, Janet and her team have introduced sort of shorter, broken down training courses, because spending, as I'm sure you're aware, spending a long time on Zoom is mentally tiring and not easy. So we've broken down training sessions into smaller blocks, broken up with exercises, more tea breaks and so on, that sort of thing. So in a lot of cases, libraries are shut right now. Some are obviously opening back up, so it's a bit of a hybrid approach. Staff are either in the office or at home. And what we have, the feedback we have had is that people who have moved to Koa has actually made it easier when they haven't had access to the physical building. And again, Lucy alluded to that a little bit earlier on, that when you have a library management system like Koa, you can do everything through the web browser. So you're not worrying about the thick client. And historically, where you've had a sort of thick client type of installation, you need the IT staff to help you get set up, which means that you need to help set up a home as well. Again, of course, with Koa, it's all through a web browser, so there's no need to have the IT people invading your house. Koa is a responsive application. It has been for many, many years, and that means you can run it on a tablet or a phone. So actually, you don't really even need to be in your own home. You can be you can be outdoors. You can be anywhere and run Koa on any device. And one of the beauties of that, often with mobile applications, you don't get a fully functional library management system. As Lucy said, with Koa, there's no license fee as such, so you get access to everything in the system, everything down to those article requests into library loans. You get a fully functional library management system. So people have been very busy with COVID issues. Yes, I think that's true. Libraries are always busy places, of course. But interesting just to share a couple of bits of feedback we've heard throughout this year. Firstly, that the libraries who have implemented have actually found it beneficial and an opportunity to be able to implement different parts of the services in a staggered manner, so not necessarily having to go for a sort of big bang approach. And big benefit is opportunity to test things without the users around. So in the case of, particularly with our public libraries, there's hasn't been a huge demand on reservations in certainly in the early part of the pandemic. Great opportunity to test that all your rules work without the end users being there. I mentioned about not having access to help or resources. Well, of course, we're still here, and behind us is a huge community of thousands of Koa users worldwide. And if anything, I think we've certainly probably been more active this year remotely than ever before. And I think that's true of some of our companies that we work with throughout the world. There was even the Koa user group meeting in New Zealand, which was broadcast across the world last month. So still a lot of support out there. And that's really what open source is about. It's about actively collaborating, sharing, and promoting Koa. So we're all here to help. And as I mentioned, we've deliberately this year created extra content because we can't be on site training people face to face, which we love to do, but we're not being able to do that. So we've created a fortnightly, almost a video style blog, really, called What's on Our Mind. And that's a very short, digestible video, usually 5 to 10 minutes on a specific topic. And we've had great feedback on those, and we're intending to keep those up indefinitely. We've done a lot of free webinars like the one we're doing today. We've done others, our customer day as well, so that's been great. Our YouTube channel has become particularly busy this year with content. And I guess where we're slightly different, perhaps from proprietary companies, is with proprietary companies, you often find a lot of promotional information on their YouTube channels. Ours is all instructional content. So videos about how to do things, how to create reports, charts, inquiries, and so on. It's all instructional information. We've had a customer forum for quite a number of years. That's again been particularly busy this year, and particularly with a lot of topics that everybody is suffering with, I guess, in terms of sharing of similar problems, changing due dates, click and collect issues. So we've had great feedback from that as well. And just really to finish off, one of the things with open source that we certainly feel is that there's a lot of synergy between what we believe are the values of open source and what we see as the values of libraries. So libraries are typically all about collaboration and community, privacy and security of their patrons and members, all about promoting truth and freedom of information, standards and preservation, of course. And that's, again, themes that you see constantly throughout, not just Koa as an open source project, but open source projects generally. So I've already mentioned Koa is a large community who collaborates. Koa, you can look inside it. It's not just a black box of proprietary software. And again, Matthew touched on that. It's you can look at it. It's highly visible in terms of the QA. Tend to have more information neutrality, tends to be less susceptible to information restrictions. So that's another sort of theme of open source. And of course, really, open source couldn't operate at all without following international standards. And there's obviously a huge number of international standards in IT, but there's also a lot of international standards in libraries as well, as you know. So there are a lot of synergies between the two things. So I guess reasons why implementing a live management system during a a pandemic is a good idea. You'll almost certainly save money, regardless of when you do it. We've got all the tools in place to do a project remotely. We don't mind whether your staff are at home or in the office. We can accommodate either. There's lots of help available to you out there, some of it from us, some of it from other places. Your library management system is in the cloud, so you don't have to be on site to use it. You can use it from anywhere. And interesting enough, in some ways, COVID-19 does create opportunities. And I guess the libraries that we have implemented this year are probably in the glass half full category, that they've seen this as an opportunity, a period of time where that maybe they won't have again, and it is an opportunity to look at freshly at the library management system and do something exciting. So that's been great. But at the end of the day, we don't really quite know how long this is going to go on. I mean, we're hoping that next year things will be better, but we're not really quite sure when. And to be honest, everything that I've spoken about, the principles are true whether COVID is here or not. So, you know, Coa and open source is value for money. There is a vibrant community behind it. Your live management system is in the cloud. That's all true regardless of whether COVID is here or not. So we feel there are a lot of same principles there regardless. And we've done a lot of fast track implementations this year. So in fact, one library specifically asked us to move them to Coa very quickly because they wanted a web-based system that they could use from home. And again, Lucy alluded to that a little bit earlier. So it's been quite a busy year for us. So no, you're not totally mad if you fancy doing a library management system at this time or in the near future, and we'd be very happy to talk to you about that.